for being here today. Our own Texas State Representative, Mike Schofield. Katy's Honorable Mayor, Chuck Brawner. Our members of our council, Chris Harris and Janet Court. City Administrator, Byron Hebert. Our first responders, the police, fire, and EMT heroes. Well deserved, thank you. Since I'm still new to the community, is there anyone that I have missed? If so, please stand and be recognized. Good. Where were you on September 11th, 2001? I know just where I was. I was sitting in my Richmond, Virginia office cussing at the internet and my staff because they couldn't get it to work. And then my boss came in and announced that a plane had hit one of the towers. I immediately changed from anger to sorrow and dread. Robyn Anzulis, the winner of National VFW 2017 and 18 Voice of Democracy, I'm throwing a plug in here, $3,000 contest, worked on a theme that was the American history, our hope for the future. She doesn't remember it. She doesn't remember 9/11. She was 18 months old. And when I started putting together my feelings of 9/11, and how it affected me and some friends, I started thinking very seriously about watching Robyn give her speech at the National Convention. She said it all. And rather than me taking up the time, I'm going to let her tell you her feelings about 9/11 and our current generation.
On the morning of September 11, 2001, Aziz Hassan woke up bright and early, heading out the door with a skip in his step. He drove to 3 different New York City post offices in search of a new postage stamp commemorating the Muslim holiday Eid. His final stop was the North Tower of the World Trade Center. At 8:46 a.m., he heard what he would later describe as a sonic boom. 102 minutes later, the North Tower collapsed, leaving Hassan, a lucky escapee, covered in dust and grime. Even now, debris from the towers remains trapped beneath his eyelids. September 11th is a day that Aziz Hassan will never forget. However, it is also a day that I will never remember. I was 18 months old on September 11th, 2001. And my knowledge of the event has come through the harrowing stories of my elders, documentaries, news articles, and, yes, history textbooks. I have learned that on that fateful Tuesday morning, terrorists hijacked 4 planes and crashed them into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. This resulted in the deaths of nearly 3,000 people and the deployment of troops for the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. But this is what the history books will not tell you about September 11th. From the ashes of the World Trade Center arose a sense of unity that America has not seen since. Then President George W. Bush responded immediately and forcefully, earning a 90% approval rating, one of the highest in American history. Typically contentious lawmakers stood together on the steps of the Capitol singing "God Bless America." And we, the people, vowed never to allow terrorism to destroy the American spirit. September 11th, 2001 is this century's version of Pearl Harbor, a rare moment in our history in which unity prevailed over the tragedy of what had occurred and the divisions that typically exist in our country. For just an instant, we were not Democrats and Republicans, not libertarians and liberals, not African Americans or Asian Americans. We were just Americans. But sadly, unlike the generation that united on 9/11, my generation has never experienced national unity. Our hope for the future relies on the knowledge that we are more similar than we are different. It depends on our ability to come together, even when internal strife and external enemies seek to divide us. Yet today, even standing for the national anthem is a divisive issue. Fortunately, 9/11 survivors such as Aziz Ahsan are trying to keep the legacy of that day alive. Since September 11th, Ahsan has brought people of all walks of life together, working with Jewish teenagers to promote an understanding of religious intolerance and encouraging Muslim Americans to create a more positive view of Islam. He even became the president of his local school board in the hopes of continuing to spread a message of unity to my generation. Additionally, September 11th has emerged as a national day of service, a day to come together and assist those in need. On this day, students around the country mobilize to take part in service learning projects in memory of the victims of the attack and in honor of the soldiers who fought in its aftermath. These charitable activities and unity programs instill pride in our youth and challenge them to become leaders in their communities. Still, good deeds in themselves are not enough to fulfill the responsibility that history has placed on us. In the interest of our future, now is the time to remove the debris from our own eyes. We must heal our divisions and see each other as part of the same American family, because history reminds us that when we act as one people, as one nation, we can overcome any obstacle. Hence, learning from our history is our hope for the future, and rekindling a lasting sense of unity must be America's #1 priority. Thank you. God bless you all, and God bless America.
It was well said, wasn't it? Yes. She obviously received a standing ovation, and there were a number of gentlemen right around me that had tears in their eyes after they heard that, because she struck home. And we all know what that is. At this time, I would like to ask Representative Mike Schofield to please present his remarks.
I think it was very fitting that the commander opened his remarks today with an allusion to where he was at the time of the attacks. When I was growing up, everybody would tell you, and it's axiomatic that everyone knew where they were when John Kennedy was shot. For my parents, they could tell you exactly where they were when they heard the news about Pearl Harbor. In my generation, the first act that we had, that we all can remember where we were, with a clarity and with a precision that will stay with us for the rest of our lives, was when we heard that the towers were attacked on 9/11. And these events all have something in common. They were all attacks on America, the American government, and the American way of life. And they all eventually brought us together. The Kennedy attack, a little long, initially, and then it was harder. But Pearl Harbor, the entire country came together immediately. And nobody here is old enough to remember, but there were very serious divisions in the country about whether we should get involved in World War II. The Lend-Lease Act was extremely controversial. But after Pearl Harbor, the nation spoke with one voice, and the nation acted together. After 9/11, again, the nation spoke with one voice, and we acted together. We need to be able to keep that spirit without being reminded by an attack every few decades. That is what America is about. The point of this country is not that your side has to win or the other side has to win, but that each and every one of us is entitled to their point of view, and that whatever the majority decides is the path we're going to go down, and we all go down it together. I grew up in New Jersey, don't tell anybody. I didn't have the great fortune of growing up here. And I knew people, friends of mine I went to high school with, who worked in the World Trade Center and the area around there. And in fact, a friend of mine from here in Houston had just moved up to New York, and they asked me for advice on where they ought to live, and I directed them to a building that faced the World Trade Center. And theirs was one of the first buildings that didn't fall. You can imagine how I felt all day trying to get a hold of them to find out if I had sent them into a place that had collapsed. When I went, the first time I could go back up there and visit my parents, I went into a little bookstore that I always used to go into in a little town called Clinton, New Jersey, about 2,000 people, a very quaint little town on the river. And I walked in there just to, as I always did, just sort of see what was new and see what kind of books were at. And for those of us who were in Texas and further from the actual attacks, this was a national event. But to the people who lived there, whose husbands and neighbors commuted into the World Trade Center, this was a very, very personal event. And I heard people talking about, well, you know, Mr. Weston never came home. They had never found him. And talking about people who went to work one day and never came back. And that is something that we always understand can happen. Terrorism and people who wish us ill are always going to be out there. And particularly as long as we insist on being a democracy and insist on showing people in the rest of the world that you can have your say and you can have your differences and come together, that is an extremely dangerous idea for people who believe that you must do it their way, you must follow their theocracy, you must follow their path, otherwise you're an infidel. And as long as we present that bright shining light, we are going to be a threat to them, and we must be ever vigilant. I'd like to close what we're supposed to be brief remarks by reminding ourselves that this was the day that we first heard that phrase that has always been true, which is the first responders are the people that are running into the building when the rest of us are running out. And it behooves us to remember on a regular basis that it's our neighbors. Nobody sends them to us. These are people that grew up with us, went to school with us, and chose to be in a position where they are protecting us every day. And as we have people kneeling during the national anthem, and as we have people attacking the police, we need to remember that our neighbors who are keeping us safe deserve our support the way they supported us when it really mattered. Thank you all very much, and I appreciate you all coming out to support and to remember 9/11, and we must always keep in our hearts that same spirit that we had that day and moving forward. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to ask our very own Mayor Chuck Brawner for his remarks.
Yes, we all remember what we were doing that day. And I remember what I was doing that day when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And I saw the country come together on a terrible act that occurred in Dallas, Texas with John F. Kennedy. I was in my high school history class when the announcement came over. I lived and grew up in Dallas. One of my best friends went down to see John F. Kennedy and saw the assassination. The fear that ran through us at that time, not knowing exactly what was going on, but that was another act that brought our country together. Whether you were Democrat or Republican, it didn't matter. Our president had been killed. And then we come up to 9/11. And I know what I was doing that day. As a former law enforcement officer, I was in the middle of the street investigating a major accident. And dispatch came over there and said that the World Trade Center had been attacked. I knew then that for the law enforcement community, the firefighters, our first responders, things will never be the same. Because you never know what's going to happen next. And our first responders, fire, police, EMS, they're the first line of defense for us. Even here in Katy, Texas. Because if we look back over the last few years, and you look at the terrible acts that have occurred in the business place, people being shot up, our schools, and trying to protect our children, who's the first ones there? Is our law enforcement. And now there's training that goes on constantly, and it's always in the back of your mind, is it going to be us next? Are we going to have to face that demon that is out here in our community? But when we bind together like we did today, and what this little young lady had to say is so truthful, is that there's strength in unity, there's dedication in unity, there's dedication to respect everyone's rights, but not to have them trampled on. And it's so important to remember this day. It's hard to believe that it was 17 years ago. It's hard to believe so much time has gone past. And we're still thinking about all the loss of life on that day. But the loss of life of our many courageous military personnel that have been fighting against evil in that part of the country and lost their lives. And even for me, I remember a good friend of my son's that lost his life fighting for evil in Afghanistan. So today is a day to sit back and remember where we've been, put our dedication together with our fellow Americans, and move forward in one joint effort, regardless of the differences that we may have. God bless you, first responders. God bless you, military, that is out there now. And for these men and women that have served our military that are here today. God bless you all. And God bless Texas. And God bless Katy. Thank you all.
Will everyone please rise for our wreath presentation? A wreath will be presented by Representative Schofield and Mayor Brawner, while our honor guard fires a salute, joined by the Katy Fire Department ringing an engine bell, followed by taps to honor all those innocent victims and first responders who perished that day. And salute! Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our program for today. The wreath will be placed in its rightful place at the police department, probably before the rain starts, or maybe we should wait till after the downpours. And again, I thank you all for being here to help honor our heroes and those that lost their lives on 9/11. Thank you.